Nancy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
That's such a strong bio. It really hits home exactly the story that you've been through and your life growing up, and also everything that you're purposeful about today. I love it. So, to get you started, 2 questions I always ask my guests. So, first question is, what are you struggling with currently? And second question is, what have you overcome recently?
So I would say the thing that I'm struggling with currently is blame. Yeah. So just noticing this correlation between shame and blame, and that oftentimes if I get caught doing something that I shouldn't have, or if, I drop the ball on something for my partner, like things like that, where I'm just like, well, this and this, and like blame it on all these other external circumstances or on her, and not taking the responsibility. So that's one of the big things that I'm working on right now, is like taking responsibility for everything.
Takes a
And
lot of ownership and growth. It's a hard
yeah,
one.
it really does.
And one thing you've overcome recently that you previously struggled with, but you feel like you have it conquered now.
I don't know if I
Yeah,
ever like
conquered is
conquer
a
anything.
aggressive word.
I look at growth as a spiral, kind of like a
Mm.
cyclone, where it's like you have this big circle and you're like, yeah, I worked on this thing. And then you come back around to it again. And you're like, what? I thought I worked on this, but you're coming at it from a little bit deeper level that time. And so I would say the thing that I've worked on in the past that I feel like I'm at a place now where I can help others with it is taking care of the small me. And like that's something that came up in my last retreat, was sharing the story of how at one point I rented a 2-bedroom apartment and felt like, oh, this is so luxurious to have a second bedroom when it's just me. But then I was like, you know what? This second bedroom is for little Nance. And she needs to have space to be her, to be creative, have art space, things like that. And then now, like, keeping that in mind all the time of how do I need to be tending to little Nance in this situation?
I love that.
Things flare up a lot less when she's heard and listened to.
And I know that you are really good at that because I heard what you do is you take all Wednesdays off for soul days. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so it's a challenge because, like, I'm a mom of young kids, and we pay for childcare a few days a week so that I can work on my business, and then to, like, take a whole day to just care for my soul is super challenging, and to be honest, I don't always do it. Sometimes I get roped into this podcast or something they're only able to record on this certain day,
Yes,
and
I
so
heard that.
I, and, like, there's urgency, and so sometimes I'm like, "Yeah, I just have to finish this copy for this one, next promo that I'm doing." But as much as I am able to, I try and block it out and go to nature if I can, rest, journal, listen to something that's, like, feeds me spiritually, and that's made a huge difference because, like, I was recognizing that I was, like, getting burnt out and then blaming my wife for being burnt out, and she's like, "Okay, you need to take your downtime." I'm like, "Right." So,
Nancy, I go through the exact same thing of being burnt out, and then when my significant other wants to spend time with me, I'm never not present, and I'm
mhm,
like, "Oh, well, I don't have time to do this because I have to hang it with you this day." What a terrible message as a significant other to receive, and it's nothing about them, it's me not taking time for myself first, and then feeling guilty for spending any time with anyone else.
mhm.
So, I'm working on
Yeah,
it. But
and
like
taking
you, the
ownership.
yeah, like you said, the day that you do take for yourself or try, I think a great step is at least putting down the idea of I'm going to try to attempt for this day to always be off. I think that's a great first step, but obviously life
Mhm.
happens.
Yeah,
But
and, like, I have things I can do where I don't have any calendar slots where anyone can sign up for on that day, and it's like, "Okay."
yeah, you got to block it off. If the calendar is closed, I sometimes, a lot of times when I work in real estate, I usually take Sundays completely off and mostly to work on the podcast. And it's still the weekends. People want to see houses and see apartments
Mhm.
on Sundays.
Yeah,
And if I feel like it's not the right conversation to be like, hey, I take Sundays off, if I feel like there's going to be pushback, I just say, oh, I'm fully booked. My calendar is full. Because
right.
technically it is. It's
Yeah.
full for me and for working on another part of my life.
Mhm.
So, oh, boundaries, but that's not even what we're here to speak about. So, Nancy, I want you to go into just a high level overview of your story and why we're here today and the topics we want to talk about. And then I'll let the conversation flow with my own curiosity.
Awesome. Yeah, so as you said in my bio, I'm a coming out coach, help support particularly queer folks in empowerment, and that's been my own like journey over the last few years. I probably had my first inkling that I'm gay at s- grade 6, and then again at grade 12 it like really hit me. I was reading a book and I was like, "Oh, this might be me." And then just, like, all the messages in my life of, like, my church and my parents, different people was like, "No, like, just keep praying in a way, like, we all have these thorns in the flesh that we have to work through." And so just, like, kept putting it in the back of my mind as much as I could, and then it wasn't until I was 33 that I finally came out, and so looking at, like, all those years that I didn't fully live as myself, as accepting myself, and not wanting anyone else to have to go through that, and wanting people to not that, like, my life was terrible, like, I had a good life, but, like, I love now this work that I'm doing with people where like, I have a 42-year-old client who, until 42, never thought that she could have love, never thought that she would be connected to someone, like, never even think she was worthy of it, never think she could dream of it. And to now be like, "Oh, I can speak my truth," and even though it's scary and my family might be off put by it at first, they love me and they want me to be happy, and now, like, I can find love and move forward in so many ways, and going from feeling suicidal on the couch to laying on the couch with your girlfriend is a pretty huge shift in a year.
Very, very huge shift.
So I'm just like, oh, I love that I get to support others in stepping more fully into who they are. And yes, like mainly I work with queer folks, but I think that everyone has some kind of story where they've kept themselves small in some way and they haven't, it's been scary to take off this layer of protection and share with the world like this is actually more true of who I am and show up in that way, which I think, like, is the heart of our superpowers is, like, when we can share all of who we are, and so helping people unwrap that so that our whole world can be enriched.
I love that. The work you're doing is beautiful, and we will get into that in a little bit. Now, as you said, you came out a lot later in life, age 33. I'm not 33 yet, and I feel like I've lived a pretty full life so far, a big part like, that's my whole life. What in your life and in your community and the thoughts going into your head prevented you from coming out earlier?
I'd say the main thing was religion. Like, I was raised pretty conservative Christian. My parents were missionaries in Kenya when I was growing up, and, like, I went
Very
to
involved in the church.
right? Like, I went to Bible college, I became a youth pastor, like, so that was, like, my whole world, and so it felt like I would blow up my whole life if I came out. And so
Literally.
I'd say, yeah, that was a big part of it was just like, I can't do that. Like, I'll be all alone. I'll be destitute, like under a bridge, like the worst case scenario kind of thing. And so it wasn't until I started going to a church that was actually having the conversation of, is it actually a sin in the Bible or is there other ways of interpreting this? And having other faithful Christians who are lesbians in this church who are just living a beautiful life together and I was like, "Oh, this is possible? Like, these don't have to be mutually exclusive." And I was like, "Huh, okay, like, maybe I could start to open that up." And I started to have enough friends that were in that realm of being okay with it, that I knew even if my family or others totally rejected me, I would still have people there for me. I think that's a huge part is just knowing that you're not gonna be totally alone.
When you were growing, you said your first inkling was grade 6 and then especially at grade 12. But there's still that time between that you didn't do anything. Were you out within your friends or anything, but just kept it to yourself? Were you dating men or
I had a boyfriend in grade 7 or
mm,
8, and I don't know if I had any other boyfriends in high school, just, like, you know, hung
you
out
didn't
with
miss out on
friends.
much, to be
I know,
honest.
right?
I can speak to that.
And that's the thing too, is that, like, it worked really well for being a church girl of, like,
Yes. You were a
being
really good church girl.
pure virtuous, like, I wasn't tempted, I wasn't sleeping around, I was so holy. It's just, like, probably because I wasn't even tempted to do it with
No
guys and
temptation,
then
no
wouldn't
interest.
even let myself think about it with a girl. Like, if I look back now, I can think of different friendships I had that probably I wanted more from it, but I didn't even realize I wanted more. And probably they felt like Nancy's really grasping for something here, but I can't give it to her. I don't know what it is she wants, or I don't even know if she knows what she wants. So, like, I can look back now and see, like, oh, there was probably some dysfunction in that, but it wasn't super conscious.
And back then, I don't feel like there was a lot of queer folks in media or
Mhm,
even in books to allow you to feel safe that that is okay.
mhm. Or
So
even to present that it's an option.
exactly. It's not happening in movies. I remember the only movie I remember was probably Brokeback Mountain, and it didn't explicitly say anything.
Right.
You know? Talk to me about what sparked you to finally come out and maybe get a little bit more insight into how your family reacted and kind of your mom and dad's views around homosexuality and around their very conservative Christian views about gay people.
Yeah. So the kind of trigger moment for me was I was living in Vancouver. I'd gone there to do my master's and I had like amazing community there that was at church that was like starting to look at these things. And yet, as much as I loved it there and really loved the community, I didn't feel like I had a future there because real estate is super expensive in Vancouver and
Yes.
everyone was getting rent evicted where these
Yes.
developers would come in and say like, "You're out. We're gonna renovate this," and then it's so expensive, and so I was like, "I'm never gonna be able to buy a house here. It's just gonna be so hard." So I decided I would build a tiny house.
No way.
Yeah, you didn't know that, eh?
I did not. You have so
This
many
fits into
facets in
real
your life.
estate for you.
Yeah, that's another whole episode.
Yeah, so I approached my dad, and he's a house builder, and I was like, "Can we do this project together?" And he's like, "No, I don't want you to stay small in your life. Like, I want you to live a full and"
The irony.
I know, right? So when they came to visit one I think it was Easter, I took him to Victoria to show him someone's tiny house, and we did a tour, and he was like, "Hmm, this is pretty cool, like, it's actually a real thing." I was like, "Yeah." And so he's like, "Okay, I'll do it with you." And so we then, like, over 3 months of the summer, we just, like, worked hardcore and built this really cool tiny house. If you wanna see the tour of it, it's called Margot the Tiny House on YouTube.
And I will add that link to the show notes because I think people are fascinated by that.
Yeah. And so we built it in Alberta where my parents live. And then everywhere that I tried to park it in Vancouver, like anyone I asked didn't have space because it's Vancouver, or they didn't own their place and their landlord wasn't okay with it. And so I was like, I think it might be time to move. And I had already like thought maybe it was time. Anyways, first person I asked in Calgary was like, "Yeah, park it in my backyard. I'd love that." And I was like,
Of
amazing.
course.
And so I was like, "Okay, I think it's time to move." And so I moved, and it was, like, sad and scary, but I also knew it was time. And then something in that move, I felt a bit anonymous, and there was kind of an incubation with that. And so I felt safe to, like, hunker into myself a little bit more. And, like, in Vancouver, I was using my practicum for my master's, and it just, like, went into a full practice of sitting with people, helping them pay attention to the divine and how the divine's showing up in their life, and I was on the board of my church and all these things, so I was like, "Well, if I came out here, I'd lose all credibility with everyone and my business and everything." So, being a bit anonymous, I had to start over anyways in Calgary. I was like, "Okay, like, I'm gonna start to face into this a bit more." And then I went to a friend's wedding in Mexico, and she was marrying a woman, and we were all sitting around the pub one night, and these guys walked in, they're like, "So how many lesbians are there at this lesbian wedding?" And everyone laughed, and they're like, "How many do you think?" And so they start going around the circle, and they go to our one friend, and she's got long brown hair, she's an Anglican priest, and they're like, "No." She's like, "Yeah, my girlfriend's waiting for me back home." And then they go to our other friend who's got short blonde hair, and she's a hairdresser, and they're like, "Yeah." She's like, "No, my husband and kids are waiting for me back home." And they're like, "Hmm." And they go to me and they're like, "I don't know." I'm like, "I don't know either." It's like this moment of confession that I blurted out. And kind of
Wow.
from then on, it was out and couldn't
Mm.
like kind of pull it back because people heard it. And my friend checked in with me and was like, "Okay, that probably brought up a lot for you." And so I started to face into it then.
I love the stereotypes. Hey?
I know.
No,
Just
no one
never
with
know.
long feminine hair
Right,
can be gay, but everyone with short hair is
right.
definitely gay.
That's it. Yeah,
That's all you need to know. Oh my god. Too
yeah,
funny. But I think historically, like, back in the day, that was kind of, I guess, the norm, but now I think people are a lot more fluid with their sexuality,
yeah, yeah.
and their identity and their appearance. So, yeah, for some straight men, I think, yeah, it would probably be pretty confusing.
Mhm. And
But it sounds
that
like they got a kick out of it.
yeah, they did, and that stereotype kinda played into my own, like,
Mm,
further coming out story because I got home and I realized, like, there's so many things about my life that I would like to be doing differently, but I'm not because I'm scared of what other people will think. And so, like, I wanna have an asymmetrical haircut, but I'm scared people will think I'm a lesbian.
but your hair is
I
so cool.
right? So then yeah, and, like, I have a motorcycles license, but I don't ride it because people might think I'm a lesbian. So just, like, realizing how small I had made my life because of all these fears of what
You
other
couldn't
people would
express
think.
yourself of what you actually were passionate about or wanted to look
No.
like.
Yeah. And so that was one of the things is, like, I'm gonna make a tangible change for this internal change or, like, realization. And so I went and got my hair cut and shaved off the side of my hair and made the asymmetrical haircut, which I love now. That was also part of how I told my parents then was I got
Talk
my
to me about
haircut.
that.
I got my haircut
Do you
and
just show up with your new haircut and you
they
start the
they were in
conversation?
Arizona because 'cause they're
Mm.
snowbirds, and so they were like we were just on the phone. I was like, "Hey, yeah, I just got my haircut, and this is what it represents." And they were like,
Were you
"Okay."
FaceTiming them?
No, just on the phone. And they like, I think they weren't totally shocked because I had mentioned it in high school and stuff of like, "I wonder this about myself." But I think they were a bit like, "Oh, like, you're not gonna keep fighting this? You're not gonna keep praying it away?" And at different points, like, my dad at one point told me that I was ruining his life, and my mom felt like she had to get off of the board of a conservative Bible college she was on the board for, and so just things like that where it was like, "This is kinda why I didn't wanna come out because I didn't want it to be hard for you," which I also am working on not managing other people's emotions. The interesting thing is, like, right now, my new chapter is how do I sit with them and hear their experience more? Because for a long time, I felt judged by them, and so I told this story recently on a podcast, and my mom heard it, and she was like, "That wasn't exactly what was going on," and so maybe in one of my next
Interesting.
solo podcasts, or maybe I'll interview my mom in a podcast soon
Please.
and hear what was going on for her, because I think that is important to get more clarity on and not just assume things.
I know because a lot of the times when people come out and they come from a very conservative Christian background, they block their families out because they feel like their families don't understand them, their families don't accept them. But I think a lot of families, it's not that way. It's just that generation doesn't understand. And they've
Mhm,
never had any people in media or they haven't been exposed to anything that have
mhm.
made them a little bit more comfortable with it.
Yeah, because at one point, my mom did admit that her only really context of gay people was, like, gay pride and Mardi Gras and things like that, where it's just, like, debauchery and people walking around naked and having sex with everyone, and she's like, "I don't want that for my daughter." And so for her to now, like, see I have a beautiful life with my wife and kids, and I think maybe she's gotten to know some of our friends and things and to see, like, "Oh, like, there's a different way of doing this."
And that generation, when they think about homosexuality and people being queer, their first word they also think about is AIDS. And I think
Mhm.
that's what a lot of that
Yeah,
generation is
a
really
lot of
scared for,
fear.
especially family with males coming out as queer. They're
Mhm.
really
Yeah.
scared. And I
Yeah,
think
for
that
sure.
inherently shows your family really loves you. They're just
Mhm.
scared for you.
Right, but we can misinterpret it as judgment or
And
disapproval.
hatred,
Mhm.
disapproval, and
Yeah.
my heart goes out to, like, people like your parents and those families because obviously it seems like your family has turned around a bit and become a lot more accepting. I want you to speak about you and your wife have 2 babies, and I wanna talk about you guys were pregnant at the same time, and I wanna talk about that experience because I don't know anyone that went through that process, and I think that's another level of normalizing everything, you know?
Mhm.
You have a boy, girl, or 2 girls?
A boy and a girl.
And they're 25 days apart?
Yeah. So, yeah, we really love helping people realize, like, you can be really creative in reproduction process, and, like, I think, so many of us just get caught in this, like, a man and a woman, and you have sex, and that's it, and it's like, actually there's so many different ways for all kinds of people. And so like often it's just assumed for lesbian couples that you'll just go to a sperm bank and do that. And for us, we were like, no, we actually want this not to be like a doctor's office procedure. We want it to be this act of love between us. And so we worked to, mine our community for a good person that could help us with this. And we found a friend of a friend that was highly recommended, and he was open to helping us. And so he gave us some sperm and we did it at home. And it was a really beautiful process between us. And we realized neither of us could decide who wanted to go first. And we
Mm.
we knew we both wanted to carry at some point, and then we're like, "Well, in Canada, we get a year off for maternity leave for each live baby," and so we get to have a year off together, and the other
So
huge
cool.
thing of why we chose to do it at the same time was so that we could both breastfeed both babies, because we wanted that kind of biological connection that we wouldn't have otherwise had with the other baby, and it's been really special to have that, like, truly incredible, the bonds that we've cross-contaminated in our family.
So cool. And your babies are very healthy, cute, sweet
Mhm.
babies.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're almost 3 and just so
It's my favorite
fun. They're
age.
such good friends. They fight
Mhm.
sometimes, but, like, mostly they entertain each other, and
Do they look alike? Do they
they
look like
do.
twins?
Yeah, they really do.
Cute.
Mhm.
What's their names?
Maeve and Sawyer.
I love that. Very, very cute. The only example I know of same-sex couples having babies, or I guess 2, again in media, Neil Patrick Harris with his kids, and, one of the guys from Million Dollar Listing. They used a friend of theirs, I think, to get the embryo, and I think they mixed, but and then they end up having twins, like an
Mhm.
actual boy-girl twin. So cute.
Right. So cute.
It's beautiful, and
There's so many creative ways to do it now, and
I wanna talk a little bit about what you do for your job. You call yourself a coming out coach. I think that's so cool, like,
Mhm.
very cool. Now, you did a master's in spirituality, so you weren't always doing coaching, so where has your career brought you? Like
Yeah, so after I finished for my master's, I did a practicum, and I was saying that led into a practice where I was sitting with people. And then when I moved to Calgary, I recognized, like, not everyone recognizes they have a spiritual need. And so I did some extra certification to branch out into coaching where I could meet with people and like talk about career stuff or talk about relationship stuff and meet people where they're at. And because like all of it comes back to the spirituality and like this deep core of who we are and wanting to connect with a deeper part of ourselves. But the access point is sometimes hard to figure out. And as I was going along in my practice, I realized like 80% of the people that I'm working with these days are queer. And so, what if I kind of niche into that of really being there for them? Because it's rare. Like in my own, like I'm always in self development work. And I would say, like, I've had one coach who was queer, maybe
wow.
two somewhere along the line. Like, it's quite rare. And then when I do get to have them, like, oh, like you understand me on a deeper level. And I
And that's how
think,
they feel about you now.
yeah. And sometimes it feels like coming out coaching is a bit of a misnomer. It's like too narrow because I think a lot of people think that coming out is just like this one act and you do it, but like coming out is a continual process. And so there's always a new layer. And so that's why I say like all of us in some ways have coming out processes. And I'm really good at holding safe space for people to come and hear themselves. And I love holding that container so that they can a lot of it is people figuring it out for themselves, but me holding the space for them because I believe that everyone is empowered and has these gifts. We just don't always take the time to listen in.
Can you share any of the beautiful transformations you've seen with your clients?
Yeah, so like I just had a retreat last month and already like the next day after the retreat, someone posted on their Facebook like this and this and this are the things that are true about me and you need to know this. And she'd been hiding that about herself for years and is like, "Yeah, I'm ready to move forward," and was scared work-wise of like, "Will people not hire me because of this?" But to be able
Really?
to yeah, like that's a real fear that people have.
Wow.
And so to be able to face into that and recognize like, if someone's not gonna hire me because of that, they're not my people, and trusting that there will be better people better suited for you, and it will make space for those clients that are more your soul clients to come to you, and so things like that, things like I think a lot of queer folks who have been closeted for a long time haven't let themselves even dream about their future. and the future seems
Mhm.
bleak because often it's like, I'll never find love, things like that. And so a lot of our work is dreaming together and helping them speak out their deepest desires of where they want to live and what that house would look like and what their family life would look like and different things like that. And then I have some like magical processes that I sprinkle in to help it come to fruition. And one of my clients did that exercise in November and is moving into a condo this week with a new
With their
partner.
significant other.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, not the partner's not moving in yet, but, like, has a partner in their life, which none of that existed, like,
That wasn't even
she's
in the realm of
no,
possibility
like,
6 months
in
ago.
October at the October retreat was the first time that she said out loud that she's gay in a group of people. So, it's just, like, amazing to see these transformations happen and people truly
Your
living now.
your heart must ache every time you get a new client because I'm sure you're going through the emotional process that you've been through, and
Mm.
you're watching them, and I'm sure you're thinking like, "Don't waste any more time."
Yeah. And, like, these are the beautiful stories, but there's also the story of this guy that came to me that he's told his pastor, he's told his girlfriend that he's gay, and they both just keep telling him to pray it away, and he hasn't contacted me again to keep working with me. Like, he had an initial session
Wow.
and hasn't come back, and I'm just like, "Oh," that's when it breaks my heart
That's
is
the client you need to spend the most time with.
yeah, and so I also think that a lot of queer folks haven't been in the habit of investing in themselves, and so that's a hard place to be in where it's like, this feels so foreign to be spending money on myself and time on myself.
Talk to me a bit more about your spirituality practices. It's interesting because a lot of times, and correct me if I'm wrong or correct any of my ignorance, a lot of times people are sheltered into not coming out and shamed into not coming out because of that religious aspect. So it's very interesting to me that spirituality is such a big focus in your life.
Mhm.
Are spirituality and religion mutually exclusive or can they be the same?
I think they're different. I think that religion is more about tribalism, and each
Mm,
religion kinda has its rules of you're in or you're out, and spirituality is much more all-encompassing, and I think we're all spiritual beings in some regard. We just don't all take the same time to pay attention to it. And so, yeah, like for me, being raised super Christian and feeling like these two things were at odds within myself was hard. And, in culture too, there's a lot of queer folks that are like, Christians, no, like X, get out of here.
absolutely not. Yeah.
And then there's a lot of Christians that are like, gay folks, no, that's not allowed around here. And
Wow.
so, yeah, to be able to walk that line has been interesting, and for a while, I kinda just went underground and didn't connect with church folks as much, and, like, I still have mentors in my life that meant a lot to me back in the day that I just cut off because I was like, "I don't know how you're gonna feel about me now, and I'm scared to hear it," and, held them at arm's length, and some of them I've started to welcome back in and, like, had opening conversations of like, "Okay, like, what was going on for you, and how can we move forward in a new way, even if you don't fully agree with my life right now? You're still an important person in my life." Well, I haven't really answered your question about my spirituality yet.
Talk to me about some of your practices.
Yeah,
Like, what part of spirituality do you like? Are you into crystals? Or I know you're into, saging because we just did that before the
yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, my wife is part Métis, so we like to
Ooh,
smudge our house sometimes, and
very cool.
yeah, so I think as I've grown and expanded and studied, what I've come to is, like, all the different religions of the world come back to this same basis of love. If you're not in the extreme wings of any of them, like, because any of the religions have these extreme wings that are very not loving, but if you come to, like, the mystics and the people that have really spent their lives in this, it comes back to love, and so, to me, it doesn't really matter the pathway that you choose to foster more love in your life. It's a matter of, are you fostering more love in your life and noticing how the divine is showing up in your life and trying to go towards rather than against. And so, yeah, practices for me, labyrinths are really huge. I love
What's that?
walking the labyrinth. It's like a path on the ground that circles all around. It has these twists and turns. And it's unlike a maze where a maze you get these dead ends and you're constantly having to be like, is this the right way? Is this the right way? But it
Mm.
just, like, you just trust that if you keep walking, even though it feels like you're getting further from the center, eventually you will get to the center of this circle. And it's such a great metaphor for life. It's such a great way to like walk
Trust the
and
process.
meditate. Yeah. And just like as I'm walking, noticing all these things coming up within me that are reflections of what's going on in my life. And
So
so
how does
that's
that look in practice? Are you just, like, going for a walk and not worried about the direction you're going into? Or is there a
there are
certain way you
actual
walk?
labyrinths. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There like a lot of churches, some community centers have labyrinths. Like if you Google labyrinth, you'll probably find one not that far from you
Is it
that
almost
yeah.
like a maze, but not a maze?
Yeah. It's just
But
like
it's, like, built like this?
it's a path like bricks on the ground often that have flowers in between. And so you just
Really?
walk on the bricks and you just know where to go from that.
Do you think there's
Yeah.
any in Toronto?
Absolutely.
Huh.
That's your assignment for this week.
This
Find yourself
weekend?
a labyrinth, and yeah, like, that can be a really good self-care practice too of, like, slowing down, going for a walk, and trusting the process, and so I don't do it as often as I should, but there are a
Mhm.
couple around me that I like to go to, and then if I can't get to it, like, just going for a walk,
Very
especially being
cool.
in nature is so huge, and then lately, I'd say what has really revolutionized my spiritual practice is studying human design and the gene keys.
Yes, 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 yes.
More of this, more of this.
Human design is one of my biggest interests right now. All of my friends know I'm very into astrology. I don't know if you're into astrology, but it's almost a cooler version of
Mhm.
astrology. And I found when I figured out human design and I figured out my human design, my life made so much more sense. So I want to know, what human design are you?
Generator.
Really? I wouldn't
Yeah,
have when you said earlier the energy, I get that now. I
yeah,
was gonna put you as either a manifester or maybe a projector.
yeah.
I wouldn't have put you as a generator.
What about you?
What do you think?
Manifester.
Yep, through and through. Like, it's
Amazing.
it's kind of it's eye-opening, to be
Mhm.
honest.
So now that you know that, like, what practices are you using to check in with your truth and making decisions?
I got out of the 9 to 5 as quick as I could. It
Mhm.
is I have never once in my life been happy in a 9 to 5. Now I work 24/7, but I'm happier.
But you're happy, yeah.
Way happier, and especially for me, it was the structure of the time that really killed me. Because some days I might not wake up till 8:30, but there's some days I might work till 1:30 AM, and,
Mhm.
like, my day looks completely different, and it's all in my control now, and I've never felt so aligned. It makes me very happy.
Yeah. Do you know about the double opt-in for manifestors?
No, what's that?
So it's kinda like, when you sign up for an email list and then they give you an email
Mm,
and you have to click, like, "Yes, I really wanna be on this." You have that within your design. And
what do you
so
mean?
when you're presented with an opportunity to do something, you can say yes and then start moving towards it and then still check in again. So for
Mm.
generators, if I say yes, I'm committed. I have to follow through, even though it'll be cause me so much frustration if it's not the right thing.
Really?
But for
No, I'll
you
cut things and people off, like, so quick.
mhm,
If it's not a hell yes anymore, I'm like, "You're
yeah.
done."
And so like it's something as simple as if someone's buying a house. Like
Mm.
if you were gonna buy a house and you went and you looked at them all and you're like, yes, this is the one. And then you start writing up papers and then you're like, no, I don't think so. Then you can back out. But generators would be
Mm.
like energetically stuck into that transaction to
Oh,
follow it through to completion, which is hard, but like this
mm,
is a superpower you have. So pay attention to that now,
yeah.
where you have that like second opportunity to check in with yourself.
Well,
Because
I pay attention a lot more to gut intuition. If something doesn't feel
yes.
right, I just say no.
Mhm. And that's the key is that I think our lives would all be a lot simpler if we all listened to that better, and we would fill our lives with less of this, like, chaos, other things that cause us frustration or bitterness or anger because we're only saying yes to the things that are a full yes for us.
Do you use that in your, coaching practices? Does
Mhm,
it
yeah, I
help a
do.
lot?
Yeah, I offer a superpowers discovery session where people
Mm.
can come and figure out what their superpowers are, and yeah, it's so awesome to hear people reflecting back what's opened up for them, and I did a live with my group the other day because I recognized that I had gone against something within my nature and said yes to something even though I wasn't a full yes, and then I was, like, in resentment and frustration about doing it, and then at the same time, I had said yes to something that I was a full yes to, and just juxtaposing those 2 interactions of like, "Yes, I wanna do more of the yeses." But it's hard, like, socially, it's hard.
Socially so hard.
That's the part of how can I actually say no when it's gonna hurt people or it's gonna
Mhm.
be not acceptable, but we have to listen to ourselves, our deep intuition.
One thing I've learned and I'm noticing and trying to work on is manifestor's aura is really strong and repelling.
Mhm.
And it makes me take a step back and realize how I affect people so harshly sometimes, where my aura can come off as very repelling, but I'm very sweet and teddy bear like inside, but majority of people don't know that, you know?
Mhm.
So sometimes it works to my advantage. But
Have you heard
um
of gene keys?
so I was gonna ask you that. Is that the thing that you do with the 3 words? No, that's something,
Mhm.
or it is?
Well, I don't know if it's the same one, but so it's basically taking the info from your human design and then putting it into this other matrix that shows like your life's purpose and your
Mm,
life's work, your main challenge that you're here to learn, what keeps you healthy. Like it gives you 3 words for each of those different
wow.
categories. And one word is your shadow of like how that shows up for you when you're living in shadow, what the
Mhm.
gift is to help you come out of that, and then what the fullest expression of it would be. And that's the part that I just feel like it's so spiritual and so beautiful. And I'm currently in a 6-month long retreat with others who
Wow.
are working through this, especially there's a line of your love. And so, like, what you're attracting, what your
Mm,
core wounding is, the beliefs you took on when you were 1 to 7 years old, like those kinds of things. And so it's so crazy how, like, the sphere that we're focusing on that month is what keeps showing up in my life, and now I have these 3 words to anchor me to be like, "Okay, where is that
mm.
shadow showing up? How can I move into the gift energy of it?"
Interesting. Is that something only you offer, or is that something similar to human design where I can go figure out?
Yeah, you can go get your
Mhm.
chart. It will be probably a little bit confusing, like human design at
Yes.
first, but
Yes.
yeah, come do a session with me and I'll
Mm,
show you how they kinda interlink, and it's so powerful. I love this stuff. It's so juicy.
mm. I'm very into that kinda stuff. And, I don't wanna keep you much longer, but the last quick one I have for you in terms of this kinda stuff, what's your Enneagram?
So this is a hard one. I like in my master's program is when I first got introduced to the Enneagram like 10 years ago or more. And from the get-go was like, I'm a 2. I'm totally a 2.
That's the helper one, right?
Yeah, the need to
Yeah.
be needed, the helper. And
Mhm.
then in the last few years, as I've like been in relationship and facing into more things, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'm a 4.
What's 4 again?
So 4 is the need to be special, the
Mm.
artist, more emotional type. And so like I kind of oscillate, but they are interrelated. Like healthy 2 goes to 4 and unhealthy 4 goes to 2, so, like, I'm somewhere in that realm.
I am 8.
Okay.
What does
So
that
that
mean? To
also
be what? What is that one?
the need to be against, so that kinda connects with your aura of, like, repelling.
Against what? Everything?
Maybe. Does it feel like that's
Oh my god. Yeah, sometimes.
but
I
you're a
always feel
fighter probably, right? Like, you're
yes.
like
Yeah, I'm not afraid to back down.
mhm.
But to start closing it up, any words of advice or last hit home messages you wanna leave the audience with, both in maybe someone still going through their coming out journey, or maybe just someone who has someone in their life coming out and how they can support them?
Yeah, so if you're still in the closet and you're wondering about it, I just wanna say to you that the life outside of the closet is way better. And I know it seems scary and it seems like your whole life might implode on you if you actually speak your truth, but it's not true. Like it might be hard for a little bit, but it will get better. And there's so many beautiful things waiting for you outside the closet.
And Nancy, what is your next coming out story or coming out chapter?
Hmm. I would say that in my business, I've mostly done like one on one and then small retreats and things. And so I'm now getting ready to branch into corporate and like going into some of these organizations that have pride organizations in them, but they're mostly, it seems like the function of the pride organization is to educate the whole company. And that feels like hard for me to accept that what I think this, pride group needs is for someone to come in and hold space for them to feel their feels and to be a safe space for them to share like what's coming up for you as you're part of this company. And so I'm now starting thoughtful queer circles in different organizations so that people can really be enriched and nourished, and like imagine how much more productive the company would be if all these people were feeling safe and could like show up in a powerful way and share their gifts. Like, oh, can't wait.
Wow, what a beautiful next step for your
But
career.
it's for me, it's challenging because I haven't worked in corporate really. I've always been more of an entrepreneur type. And so I'm kind of
Good
like,
luck.
what am I going to do? How do I get connected? But also trusting that, yeah, if it's what I'm called to, the doors will open and I'll be connected.
I don't think you'll have any issue with getting connected. I think you have an uphill battle once you get in the door,
Hmm.
but in a way that I think you can take on.
What's your advice for me in that?
Link up with the people who agree with what you agree on, and make sure to get someone within that organization that's an ally, but also the person that they agree with whatever you want to change, but they also have a seat at the main table.
Mhm.
So they have
Influence.
influence.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just don't link up to someone at the bottom of the totem pole. Get someone at the top, whether in HR or whether in the C-suite that really has power.
Mhm. Yeah.
And last but not least, Nancy, if someone wants to be part of your coaching program, where and how do they find you?
My website is centered.ca, and I'm on socials at Nancy Shadlock. And I also have the Coming Out podcast. So it's a really great way to start to hear stories of people that have come out and then how I am with them to know if you would want me to hold space for you. So it's called the Coming Out Chronicles.
And it's fantastic. I've listened to many of your solo episodes, and it's a beautiful podcast.
Thank you.
Nancy, thank you so much. I feel like we got through a lot in this hour, and I'm glad. I feel like we hit a lot of different topics, and I hope those topics and your messages and your story hit home for a lot of people who may be struggling with the same thing. So I just want to thank you for your time, and it's been a good one.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love that you get all kinds of people on your show and mine the depths of what they know and what they're feeling, what they're doing, and your work in the world is really important too. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.